So last week, we got questions. A lot of questions. And I told you I was like, let me come back next week and give you the verses, because I want you to have the verses. I want you to have the right meanings behind them, because it's one thing to stand up here and go over it real fast, and I feel like I'll lose you in some of it. So I want to read the verses or whatnot. So we were still in the Old Testament, coming through, and we were with where they send the spies in. All right, so the 12 spies go in, 10 bring back a bad account, 2 was like, let's go. Let's go. That's Caleb and Joshua. But the other ones, we were like grasshoppers in their sight. So we got a lot of questions on the giants, where they come from, things like that. So that's what we're going to go over this morning. So Genesis 6. I told y'all that we had some verses in Genesis 6 last week of where giants come from. Lots of times we read about scholars, they link them to these verses in Genesis 6 where we get the word Nephil or Nephilim. All right, so in Genesis 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. That's key.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Okay, you're fine.
Okay, when it says the sons of God, who are the sons of God?
I'm fixing to get to that.
Okay.
I've got a verse on it, and I want to break it down. I've even got the Hebrew to show you. So, the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Okay? This is, if you go to like an interlinear and you use the interlinear, I use it all the time just because I want the root word. Because, Hebrew has words that the English don't have. Greek has words English don't have, and vice versa, or whatever. So it says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also after that. Now, right here it says the sons of God, right? This is talking about the sons of God came into the daughters of men. This right here is what we want to look at. The Bana El Ha-Elohim, or Bana Ha-Elohim. So the sons is Bana Ha-Elohim of God, sons of God. And it's found another place. So we want to use Scripture to interpret Scripture. What does it mean? So we go to Job 1, and Job 1 has the same sons of God in there. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came in among them. Who were the sons of God there? We know they were angels. We know they are if we read that whole account. So this is the same thing. Bana Ha-Elohim. Those are the two places. So that's why when we go back to Genesis 6, like scholars link the sons of God to be angels. Now these wouldn't be anything other than fallen angels, because this goes against God. All right, so we can't just say these are messengers of God doing God's will. Absolutely not. God did not want this. I cannot stand up here and tell you exactly how that happened, what they look like. Now, let me give you the other side of it, because I'm going to give you two sides. There are some scholars that say it's impossible, that angels cannot procreate. That's another part of it. You have to kind of take both sides. Now, when I'm going through and this says sons of God, and Genesis 6 says sons of God, I kind of tend to go with Scripture, interpret Scripture. Why wouldn't it mean, the angels?
The ones in Job that come before God, had they already fallen? Or were they, I wonder why they came before God. Well, Satan did too, but.
That was Satan. So yeah, he was fallen.
So all of the angels were already fallen.
They're still subject to God. They're still subject to God. And Satan, we think that Satan doesn't have access to God because we use that verse, even Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Jesus said that. And so we think, well, he's out of heaven. He's not. He has access to heaven because he's the accuser of the brethren. So he can go before God. He's not going to literally be out of heaven totally, completely until halfway through the tribulation period. If you go through Revelation and you get to that midpoint, I think it's around Revelation 13 or so, somewhere in there. I'm going off memory here. But when you get there, that's when he's cast out of heaven for good. He cannot go before God anymore. So even right now, he has access to heaven. Does it mean he's there all the time? No. If you read the book of Job right here in the beginning, God asked Satan what he's doing, and he's saying, I'm going to and from in the earth.
Because he's not omnipresent.
Because he's not omnipresent.
He can't do that.
Right.
Well, back to Debbie's question, were they fallen before Adam and Eve? I'm assuming that they did. Because of the serpent.
I was about to say, how else was it?
Okay, so
I'm thinking.
I have another
theory.
Because my thing is, when you have all of creation and you get to the end of chapter 1, it said everything was still good. Man's already created, so if everything is good, I would think they hadn't failed yet.
So there's some time between.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't know a time limit.
Right.
There's no aging at this point.
Right.
They haven't eaten.
They could have hung
or
out
sort
Garden
of-
of Eden for like a long time.
We don't know how long.
Yeah.
Am I right? Hundreds of years.
Right.
Well,
So
it could have been 2 days. We don't know.
no, it's not clear, but I
Right.
like just because it says everything was good, that's why I think that they hadn't failed yet. I think it's got to be sometime in between when creation was complete and the first sin. And I can't pinpoint when,
Yeah, I was just curious.
Okay, so sons of God.
My head's about to bust.
I just you
There's
don't
a
want
lot
to
of
think.
information going in there.
Well, this is why I'm giving you this because you're more likely to retain it if I put this stuff up
I
here.
heard both sides about angels.
Right.
I'm like you. I tend more to believe
Yeah.
it was fallen angels.
And I wouldn't stand up here and say this is spot on 100%. Wouldn't do that. I'm giving you both sides. And I'm telling you what my opinion is. And I'll tell you it's my opinion because I can't make it a fact. It's just
too much information from up here.
My daddy believed the other way.
that there wouldn't.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
they couldn't, and he gives some scriptures on that. But there were some things me and Daddy didn't agree on. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
We talked about everything. I just love to share all this. With
Yeah.
Every Sunday I'm like that. I wish I could go home and share like we used to every Sunday. we did.
All right, so let me go to the most well-known giant. All right, that would be Goliath. We all know him. So 1 Samuel 17, and there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat of mail was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. So he had a shield bearer that goes before him. I don't want to be him.
No,
Yeah, that's not the job I want.
Is he a giant too?
Well, you don't know. So this gives us a lot of information. And what I want to point out to you is it's detailed. They're not just telling you, oh, well, there was a giant. Because if we did that, it would be no more than Jack and the Beanstalk. You know what I'm saying? They're giving you specific details. So
Keith preached about that last year. He told about how tall he was, and he compared it in there in the gym. Do y'all remember that sermon?
yeah.
Where he gave details about the giant. That was so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, God is detailed.
Okay.
I get that.
So his helmet would have weighed 10 pounds.
Goodness gracious.
The coat of mail would have been between 125 to 194.5 pounds. 2 greaves on his legs would have been about 20 pounds. His breastplate would have been 20 pounds. The spearhead, just the head of the spear, between 15 and 23.5 pounds. His sword would have been 10 pounds. And the shield that was carried by another would have been 30 pounds. So we didn't add that one in. That's why I have it in red. So if we add all of those up, just with the armor he had on and what he's carrying, it would have been about 200 to 278 pounds. Okay, so last week we were talking about people who had like gigantism. You know, like they have something wrong with their thyroid or something like that, and they grow.
That has that.
Yeah, and they're not.
He is the biggest teddy bear you'd ever had in your life.
But they have joint
He's
problems.
precious.
You know,
Major.
they're not
problems.
able to carry this kind of weight. I mean, they might look big, they might,
He
you know, look
swells.
intimidating.
It's not when you go down the list.
No.
It's terrible. I feel so bad for
But
him.
you know, we see people like this in like Guinness Book of World Records. You know, like people who are 8, 9 feet tall or 7, 8 feet tall. I don't know what it is now, but they have to walk with a cane. They're not this champion. They're not going to be able to carry 200 pounds. They're doing good to carry themselves. So this shows us that this is something different or somebody different, okay? Matthew Henry's commentary gives a scripture cubit above 21 inches. A span was half a cubit. So there's different cubits. So the cubit was the measurement from a man's, the tip of his middle finger to his elbow. Well, that's different on everybody, right? So they have like a Hebrew cubit, Egyptian cubit, Babylonian cubit, So they use one that's like strictly for scripture, and that would have been 21. So what we do is we take the least and we take the most, and we give you an idea of in between, because I don't think anybody can put it down. I mean, you know, make it 100%. So that would make Goliath between 9'4" and 11'1". Either way you look at it, he's huge. He's huge. So most scholars will put him around 9'9". I mean, it's kind of iffy in the middle, but on the leaner side, that's a conservative estimate, 9'9", able to carry this kind of armor. This is not a weak 9'9". All right, so at 9'9", what would his weight be without the armor? So you double the dimensions of something, and then there's 4 times the volume. We're doing math here. So I got it. I mean, it's
Y'all do that
1.4,
math,
all
I'm
this. You get 3.8. So it's 3 4/5 times the volume of a 6-foot man. So a 6 foot tall man who's muscular and he's in good shape, he's going to be about 200 pounds. Goliath, at his least, the least height, he would have been 760 pounds. Now, okay, just think about it. We have people, I mean, that are carrying that kind of weight. Have you ever seen somebody 600 and 760 pounds and they're healthy?
No, there's a show.
Would you consider them a champion?
I've seen basketball
Go.
players
There's a
that
show
were
about
they're odd looking because
Yeah.
they're so big.
How much do they weigh?
I don't know.
They're not that big. All right, so if you have 760 pounds, we add in the armor, he's 960 pounds. That's a lot of weight for bones, joints, and everything, and he's their champion. No, I'm just saying no ordinary human could do this, okay? So Goliath's father and brothers are also mentioned in Scripture in 2 Samuel 21, 16 through 22. And Ishbi-benob, which was of the sons of what?
The giant.
The giant. Key, because we always say, well, Goliath was a giant. Yeah, he was. If he was a giant, what did his daddy look like?
I'm thinking about the mama.
Poor little thing giving birth to a giant.
I mean,
Well, she could have been a giant.
She
I
was-
would say she was probably a giant too.
she had to be big too, but still.
But not when they originally.
Giants
Oh,
and they came down.
yeah. So originally she wasn't, because they were the sons of man, the daughters of
Human.
man.
Yeah, they were just regular people.
Again, I can't tell you how it happened.
Well, it could have been that that happened over time,
Possibly.
just like everything else. Again, we don't know the number of years that took place.
And
No.
the first baby could have just been big. I mean, not maybe at birth, they just kept growing.
We don't know.
Did they have steroids and stuff in their food?
I don't think so.
All right, so it says, Ishbabenob, the weight of whose spear weighed 300 shekels of brass in weight, and being girded with a new sword, thought to have slain David. So David was the giant killer, and we're used to, hearing about him. But here, he's almost killed by one of Goliath's brothers. But Abishai, my favorite person in the Old Testament, he's the ninja of the Old Testament, the son of Zeruiah, that was David's sister, succored him and smote the Philistine and killed him. So David wasn't the only giant killer. Abishai was too. He saved David's life. It says, then the men of David swear unto him, saying, thou shalt go no more out to battle with us, that thou quench not the light of Israel. They were afraid that David was going to get killed because he was king at this point. You're not going out no more. We're going to go. You stay behind. We need to protect you. All right. And it came to pass after this that there was a battle again with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbechai the Hushathite slew Saph, which was one of the sons of the giant. So again, this was one of David's mighty men again. And there was again a battle in Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jeorgim, the Bethlehemite, slew the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the staff whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And yet there was another battle in Gath. You see the common occurrence here. They're all in Gath.
World.
They're always at battle. In
Wow.
David's time, they're at battle with the Philistines all the time. So the battle where there was a man of great stature. Now get this, who had 6 fingers and every foot 6 toes, 24 in number, and he was also born to the giant.
That's another genetic anomaly that
Yeah.
has multiple digits.
And when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, the brother of David, slew him. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath and fell by the hand of David's men.
It's terrible like that.
So you have Goliath and you have 4 brothers. So the giant of Gath had 5 children. And they're all mentioned. And they must have all been giant people because they're telling us how big their weapons are. So I'm comparing them, similar to Goliath. Sorry, I repeated that. So just to break down, the father was a giant from Gath. You have Ishbabenob, Saph, Lami, and the giant with the 6 fingers and 6 toes. And then you have Goliath. I forgot to put him on here. But just to show you, we always think that Goliath is the only one in Scripture, and he's not. We know that there's more. And now you have Og. And Og, he's found in Deuteronomy. And he is from a place called Bashan. So I always say it real fast, and everybody thinks that's his name, Og of Bashan. It sounds like a name, but it's Og of Bashan. But my southern mouth gets carried away, and I'll say Og of Bashan. So if y'all hear that, it's Og of Bashan.
That's funny.
Deuteronomy 3:11, for only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Behold, his bedstead was the bedstead of iron. It is not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon. 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. Cubit of a man. That would mean Og would be he would be 13.125 feet tall using the Hebrew short cubit. If you use the Egyptian long cubit, that's 25 inches, he would be 18.75 feet tall.
Wow.
So Goliath at 9 foot,
It's a pipsqueak.
9, yeah, he's small compared to this one. And again, it's not that just this is the giant of Gath, here's another one of the remnant of the giants. So we go back to when we were in Genesis chapter 6, the Hebrew word Nephil was in there, and that's where we get the term Nephilim. And it says its meaning is giant, bully, or tyrant. It could be used for all 3 of them. It's used in Genesis 6:4 and in Numbers 13:33. This is where we were last week in Numbers 13:33, because the body size of the Nephil, Israel was as grasshoppers compared to them. They were greater and taller than all Israel in Deuteronomy 1:28, great, many, and as tall as the Anakims, Deuteronomy 2:21. Now, when you read through the Old Testament and you have verses like this, it's hard to kind of pick up on, well, this was a giant, these were giants. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard to kind of pick up on who, because they said, oh, well, these were as tall as the Anakims. So now we have the Philistines. There's some in Gath. There's the Anakims. You have Og of Bashan. So you have these people from different places that are giants. Now, if we had a giant that lived here in Spartanburg, would everybody know who he was?
Well, yeah,
Yes.
probably.
And I imagine every town was like that had these people that were in there. Now, when the Israelites are fixing to go and conquer the land, you don't want to hear that there's giants in the land. I don't know their numbers. It was enough numbers to have 10 of the 12 spies, so I'm guessing it's not just 1 or 2. It's enough to say, nope, we ain't going in there.
Oh, well, you can't blame them with all the junk that went on with the giants.
I know. I'm not going to read that one again. So, some of the giants that are mentioned in Scripture are the Anakim. We just read one of those verses. The son of Anak. Anak was a giant. Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, tribes of giants from the Anakim. They were the 3 sons of Anak, according to Joshua 15:14. So that's 3 separate tribes there. Arba was Anak's father, Joshua 15:13. They were men of great stature, Numbers 13:32. Giants, the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. That's quoting one of those verses. So this is just of the Anakim. All right, and it's just giving you some of the tribes that they were. Josephus, he was a historian about the 1st century. So he was alive about the time Jesus was born. And Josephus speaks of giants whose bodies were so large, their countenance so entirely different from other men, that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. He declares that their bones were still exhibited in his day, which was at the time of Christ. So this is a historian telling you they were terrible to look at, terrible to listen to. I mean, what does a giant sound like?
Have to be a deep, deep voice, I
You
guess.
think maybe? I don't know.
Were all the giants mean?
All the ones mentioned in Scripture are. There's some historical accounts of women, but a lot of them are all of them are men in Scripture.
I mean, the Bible too. The Bible talks about very specific people. There are lots of people that live there.
Yeah.
So we just would have to say that if they talked about some giants, that means that there were probably many giants that they didn't talk about.
And keep in mind, this is patriarchal. Lots of times you don't have a female and you list their mothers. You always go from the male line. So if they're going to mention anybody that are giants, it's going to tell you, this was the tribe. He comes from this father. That's what we're seeing. I mean, that's how the Bible
Well,
is.
it's also proven, like what Bougie was saying, how it's been that way, it's still that way now that they fight like that. So it's sort of proving more so of the reflection of how things are in that land, in that time, even today. I mean, that they had to sort of stand up for themselves, fight for themselves. That's
I was
what
going to say, were they always mean and hateful
Right.
and wanting to fight and,
They want to push the little people around.
right. I mean,
Well, and I'm like Tracy. I think there'd be a good mix.
But I'm just not sure why they would all be mean,
Right.
unless there were so few of them that people picked on them
They
and
just
gave
felt
them a
like
hard,
they were taking
and give them a hard time.
Tracy, that's a good point, because today we don't hear about all the good deeds and things going on in the news.
That's
We
true.
only hear about the mean people and the murderers and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So some other references to giants in the Bible were Ammon was the land of giants, Deuteronomy 2:19-20. The Emims, great, Mandy, and tall.
what is that?
I have no clue. I'm
What
guessing
Mandy
like I
is?
mistyped that, so
Mandy.
Maybe
Mandy.
Manly.
Think of a song.
Manly.
I don't know.
Mandy. I don't know, Scott, what do you think?
Many,
Many
great,
tall.
many and tall with Anakims. You have, you have the valley of the Rephaim, the valley of giants, according to Joshua, the Rephaim in Genesis and 2 Samuel, Chronicles. You have giants mentioned in 2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles. If you want me to, I'll just print this out for you.
That'd be easier.
Um,
I didn't know it was mentioned that many times in the Bible.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, you just get a scripture here or there, and we don't always put it together. But if you start and you research, you have the Anakim, the Ammon, Emims, Zamzumims, Rephaims. I mean, there's a lot of those, and I just told you the other 3 tribes, that were from the other one. I mean, there's so many, like a spider web of them.
But I guess, are you trying to put together that the sons of God and you think that these giants came from that because it was a abomination?
That is what
Okay.
biblical scholars believe happened. Again, I'm not going to go so far as to say 100%.
Yeah, but that's what you. Okay, gotcha.
Yes,
That makes sense.
but like I said, some people say that the angels can't procreate. But still, where did they come from? Unanswered. Either way you look at it, we have giants somewhere because they're here, and it tells us in Scripture that they were before the flood and after the flood. Like I said last week, a lot of scholars believe, again, this is an opinion, that this is Satan's attempt to muddy the bloodline so the Messiah could not be born. It makes sense that would happen because the last thing that Satan would want would be for the Messiah to be born.
Okay, one more
Okay,
question.
go ahead.
Okay, you said before the flood and after the flood.
Mhm.
So you're saying, did they die in the flood and then they were still procreating after the flood?
How did that happen though?
So a lot of
You got Noah.
scholars believe that after Noah started to replenish the earth, I guess there were more fallen angels that come into the daughters of men after. So it happened twice. So one time before the flood and one time after the flood. I don't see any giants surviving the flood because it says,
Noah.
only Noah and the 8 people on the ark. So it would have had to happen again.
I would think fallen angels would still continue to happen to prove that.
And we're fixing to go over a verse that talks about a little bit about that. So
It's deep.
some of the tribes
I'm a
that have been
follower.
linked to giants are the Kenizzites, Kedemites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaim, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, Jebusites, Hivites, Anakims, Emims, Horims, Avims, Zamzamims, Caphtorims, and Nephilims.
You're good.
There's
Very nice.
there's a lot of them. I mean, if it was just one, they would probably be discredited, but you have them in all of these people groups. And you sum it all up, where are they at? They're in Canaan. Canaan's land, the cursed Canaan.
Promised land.
That Israel has
That
been
makes sense.
promised this land. They've got to go in and take it.
But they were instructed, the Israelites, not to marry from the
Oh, yeah.
Canaanites either.
Right.
I mean, that was a.
I wonder if this was one of the reasons why. Yeah.
But they did.
Yeah, they did, but
Yeah.
they were instructed from God not to do that. Don't go into the Canaanite. Don't marry
Yeah.
a Canaanite woman.
So there's a clue that a lot of the biblical scholars go to, and it's in the book of Jude. Now pay attention to how this reads. And the angels which kept not their first estate.
Heaven, yeah.
All right, so they didn't keep their first estate, but left their own habitation. He hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto judgment of the great day. So some are in chains. Not all, because we keep reading. It says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah. What happened at Sodom and Gomorrah?
Destroyed.
Why?
There's some bad.
Because the sin.
Because of the sin. A specific sin. So he's linking the judgment to these angels in verse 6. He's mentioning Sodom and Gomorrah, but pay attention what he says. The cities about them in like manner giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh.
Ooh.
What would be strange flesh?
Homosexuals.
In Sodom and Gomorrah, but what would be strange flesh to angels? Humans. That would be strange flesh. Are set forth as for an example, suffering the vengeance to eternal fire. So we know that fallen angels are still at work in our world. Not all of them are chained. So some scholars believe that the ones that are chained are the ones who committed the abomination, at least in Genesis chapter 6, and came into the daughters of men.
Tracy, you're looking
Okay, so, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot to process. But here's my thing. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Good.
It tracks.
I mean, it's okay if it doesn't make sense to you. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just trying to give
It does
you
make sense.
what scholars say. Because this is a hard subject. This is not something you're going to get on a Sunday morning. In church,
we
everybody,
never
but
talked about
No.
that in church.
But we can have the discussion here. This is why I wanted to give you the scripture. Because y'all had so many questions last week. It's hard for me to sit up here and just say, well, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I want you to be able to read it and come to your own conclusion, too.
I'm glad you cleared that up. I always wondered about that scripture.
We need to be dismissed. Stop.
I'm just full.
Stop.
We got to go.
Okay. I'll stop right there this week. We'll pick up next week. I'll give you the historical accounts.
We need to let our brain rest.
What if I tell you next week might be more interesting? Will you come back?
Oh my gosh, you know we
We'll
will.
always do that if you did.
Thank you. I'll tie it in and put a nice little bow on it for you.
I was rushing this morning. I was like, am I going? Am I not? And I was like, heck yeah, I'm going. We're talking about giants this morning. I miss our conversation from last week.